Welcome back to the John Fredericks Show. Great song, God is Faithful. Time now, 11 after the hour, 11 after 9. On the line with us, Hugh Whelchel from the Foundation for Faith. You help me out on that. Faith Economics?
Institute for Faith, Work, and Economics.
Work and Economics. I'm sorry. I just got tongue-tied for a minute. A little brain fog. Hugh, it's great to be back with you. I haven't heard from you and spoke with you since March. Lots going on. You got a new piece out, new book called Counting the Cost, Christian Perspective on Capitalism, which is really a needed piece right now with the way everything's going on in the country.
That's for sure.
Last time we spoke, it was right after the inauguration of the president. And, with all the events going on right here in the Commonwealth, Charlottesville, we didn't plan this. We booked you before Charlottesville, but I'll let you make some comment on that. Again, it's a matter of the heart, isn't it, Hugh? Isn't that what it's all about?
Absolutely. And I think over and over again, particularly as Christians, we're called to really analyze what we do and understand what the motives are, because it's really all about the heart. You can see two people doing exactly the same good works. One of them is doing it for them to get credit, and another is doing it for God to get credit. And I think that's what really, what's really significant about a lot of the work we do is you're getting back to, what are our motivations? Why are we doing what we do? The Old Testament has a great example of this, right? In Genesis, there's a story about a group of guys that get together and say, let's build a city that has a tower that raises to the heavens. And then it tells what their motive is, right? See, there's nothing wrong with building a city. I think building cities is a great thing. There's nothing wrong with building towers that raise to the heavens. Nothing wrong with that. But at the end of that passage, it says, let's do all this so we might make a name for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And, that is a motivation that will eventually lead you to destruction. Because when it becomes all about you, the selfish motivation that gets wrapped up into that causes disaster in the long term. And God has called His people to think about the motivation behind what they do from a completely different standpoint. And I think that's a lot of what we talk about here at the Institute. I mean, that's kind of really an underlying theme, interestingly enough. And I think it speaks to what's happening in the country today.
You guys are ahead of the curve. This new book, Counting the Cost, Christian Perspectives on Capitalism, it's an edited volume that addresses moral concerns Christians have about capitalism, featuring essays from 12 theologians, economists, and other academic leaders. Why don't you speak about it a little bit? Okay.
Yeah, what we wanted to do, let me kind of step back. One thing that we don't do here at the Institute, we don't say that the Bible teaches capitalism. I hear other people say that concerns me a little bit, right?
Right.
What we believe is that the Bible teaches sound economic principles. Let me give you an example. One of the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not steal, implies what? It implies property rights, one of the most fundamental economic principles. And if you read through the rest of the Bible has a lot to say about property rights. There's something in the Old Testament called the year of Jubilee. Mm-hmm. A lot of people will tell you, well, the year of Jubilee, that means forgiveness of debt.
Right.
And we've had some of the top scholars in the nation write for us on this subject, said, no, that's not what it's about. The year of Jubilee is about property rights. Why? Because there's never been a civilization in the history of the world that flourished for very long without strong property rights. It's a principle that God's woven into the very fabric of creation. And there are a lot of principles, economic principles like that are talked about in the Scripture. So what we would argue is that as believers, we have access to the Scripture. God reveals to us what's in the Scriptures, right? And we can read that, understand it. We need to go out into the world and find economic systems that most closely align with what the Scripture teaches, that most closely aligns with the principles found in the Bible. And we would argue today that capitalism is a system that most closely aligns. Is capitalism perfect? By no means, right? We live in a fallen world. There's not a perfect system out there. When we live in a new heaven and a new earth forever with God, will capitalism be the market system? I don't know. Probably not. There's probably something better than capitalism. We just haven't figured out what it is yet. So based on that, we see capitalism as being a very important tool that God uses to help multiply the work of our hands to produce flourishing in His creation. And we have kind of talked about this book because there's a growing sentiment, particularly in evangelical Christianity, that somehow capitalism is evil, capitalism is bad. And you hear this more and more, particularly from younger people. There's a lot of evidence that more and more young Christians are kind of moving back toward kind of a democratic socialism, however you want to define that way of looking at the world, thinking that there's a lot of things in our free market system that are bad. And so part of what we've done with this book is we've kind of gone and said, okay, give us a list of all the things that you don't like about capitalism. And we've looked at different people's critiques. And then we've brought in some of the best minds in Christendom, both on the economic side and on the theological side, to respond to those concerns, and just not kind of an offhand, emotional way, but on a deep, biblical, kind of theological, a way to understand what does the really Bible say about these issues. Here's the thing that we maintain at the Institute. Our audience is primary evangelical Christians, and because all of us have one really thing in common, and that thing we have in common is that the Bible is our guide to faith and practice. So what we're trying to do is take people back to what the Scripture says, really look at that, and then try to understand the world through the lens of God's revealed Word to us.
Cal. I'm sorry, you. One of the gentlemen on this contributed author to your book, Cal Beisner.
Yes.
Yeah, I just had him on right before you.
No kidding.
Yeah,
really? Cal's a great guy, a good friend
Cal
of mine.
Beisner's great. He comes on. I try to get Cal and you on the same time, same day, because you both have great perspectives. Cal spoke a little bit about climate change today. We spoke about the heart with Charlottesville. But both of you, I think, are great guests to have on. And I think many more people should have you on their shows. And that's why when John gives me an opportunity to fill in for him when he's out, I try, to call your organization. And I visited with you in McLean. For anybody who wants to know about the Institute for Faith, Work, and Economics, it's right in Northern Virginia, McLean, Virginia. From time to time, Mr. Whelchel and his group of people, they have Thursday nights, right, Cal?
That's right.
It's Thursday nights?
Yep. We haven't had it during the summer. We may start doing them again this fall. We're trying to figure out what the best date is.
Well, they do like a 3 or 4 week breakout sessions and so on. It's really great to go to. They have some snacks and so on, and I think it's a great organization.
Well, thank you. We greatly appreciate your kind words.
And you do have stuff up on YouTube. I know that. I've looked it up on YouTube for the Institute, and it just put Hugh Whelchel in there, and you'll see some of his stuff, where he speaks.
That's right.
Could we have a little bit of your background?
Yes, I was actually a business guy for 30 years, and really spent the last 15 years in the business world, working with and running regional computer training companies, and we were training high-tech guys, typically systems engineers and some programmers, but mainly systems engineers for businesses all up and down the East Coast, and stepped out of that about probably about 12 or 13 years ago to help a seminary that was struggling. There was a seminary here in Northern Virginia that was training pastors, and they were struggling. So I stepped out of the business world to kind of help get them back on track, and spent about 7 years doing that. And then I left that about 6 years ago to start the Institute for Faith, Work, and Economics. I felt like there's a larger kind of faith and work movement that's kind of going on in the church in the United States for probably the last 10 years or so. And I felt like there were some missing pieces to that we could bring to the table. So we started the Institute for Faith, Work, and Economics to do that and really produce strong academic biblical content that we felt like would fill in some of the gaps. And this book, Counting the Cost, is a perfect example of that. It's good, strong scholarship. And really, this book is designed for pastors and for thinkers and people that want to speak on this subject. And the primary use will probably be as a textbook in Christian colleges. Our first academic book that we wrote, called For the Least of These, is a biblical approach to poverty, and it's being used in over 30 different Christian colleges and actually in 3 seminaries as a textbook. So the primary design for this Accounting the Cost book is really aimed at that same kind of audience. Now, we also produce a lot of smaller books and booklets that you can find on our website. Our website is www.tifwe.org. That are 25, 30 pages. They're written for more kind of a general, broad audience on some of these same subjects. So you can go to our website and read some of those and download them. We have articles on the website about all these issues. We have a blog that goes out 5 days a week that we typically send out at 6 o'clock in the morning so people can read it before they go to work and get encouraged. It's kind of like a semi-devotional, kind of blog. It's pretty short, usually 600-700 words long, 800 words long, something you can read in a few minutes. But to really help you kind of, as you get your day started, think about the importance of your work, not only to you and your family, but to God himself. And how God really cares about what you do. And that doesn't really matter what it is. You could be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. You could be washing dishes in a restaurant. You could be a stay-at-home mom. Whatever God's called you to do in this season of your life, he cares about it. And he wants you to work as hard as you can, because it's your work is the tool he's designed to bring flourishing to the greater society, to serve the common good. And we need to see it in that light. And so that's kind of where I've come from. So I came out of the business world and I enjoyed my time there and felt like God used me greatly there to bring flourishing. And now he's kind of taking me in a different direction. Some days when I'm working at the nonprofit, I wish I could go back into the business world, because the nonprofit business is quite different and sometimes very challenging.
And also you do have great videos on the website.
Yes, some really good videos. I tell you, God has really blessed us. We've just had some incredibly talented people work for us over the years, and it's helped us put up some stuff. There's one little video that, if you don't watch anything else, go to our website and watch Freedom to Flourish. It's the
I saw that many times.
Opening page.
Great.
It's about 2 minutes long, and it really capsulizes what the Institute of Faith, Work, and Economics is all about. This idea of helping people realize, God's given them work to bring flourishing to their communities.
And most societies where Christianity had flourishing, people were prosperous, people flourished, and societies were great. I mean, it's not like, other societies around the world.
Well, interestingly enough, if you go back, and I'm a little bit of a history buff, and I've read a lot of history, and, the history is being revised as we speak. I mean, people are changing history all the time. But I would make an argument, and not just me, greater scholars and I have done this, that if you go back and look at the history of Western civilization, forget the last 100 years when we as Christians have kind of lost our way and have kind of gotten much more inwardly focused. But forget about the last 100 years. If you look at the rest of the history of Western civilization, almost every significant thing that's been done, whether it was starting hospitals, universities, abolishing slavery, make a list, great art, great music, great inventions, the ideas of government, and particularly the government like we have today, have come from believers who understood their calling from God was to go out into the world and do things that made a difference, build things that made a difference, create things that make a difference, that brought flourishing to their communities, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, unfortunately, we in the church have lost that vision. We're very inwardly focused. We've been kind of swallowed up in the secular spiritual divide, where we think part of what we do is secular and God doesn't really care about that. And pretty much our work is included in that. And then the spiritual stuff that God cares about is what we do at the church and maybe in our own private devotionals. Nothing could be farther from the truth. And the Apostle Paul writes to the Corinthians and tells them, whether you eat or drink, whatever you do, do everything to the glory of God. Yeah. Everything is everything, right? There's nothing that is that's not spiritual. There's nothing out there that God doesn't care about. It's fascinating. If you go back and look at the Hebrew language that the Old Testament was written in, Old Testament people, they did not have a word for spiritual.
Really?
Is that because they weren't spiritual people? You know, in this spiritual kind of secular context. No. The fact that to them, everything was spiritual. They didn't need a word to designate something as spiritual and something else as secular, because to them, everything was spiritual. That's the way it should be for us as Christians today. And we've got to get back to this idea of seeing our work as a means to bring flourishing to our communities, even to those who will never voluntarily bow a knee to Jesus Christ. They're still part of God's good creation,
Correct.
And they deserve to live in communities that are free and flourishing.
Well, Cal, I'm sorry. I keep calling you Cal because I'm looking at the sheet here.
That's all right. Well,
I do apologize. Even Michael Coleman's looking at me.
My middle name is Calvin, so
no.
I'll answer to that.
I appreciate you coming back on. Thank you. It's always a pleasure.